G'day friends, my name is James and welcome to today's video, a flip of my 5-year Hobonichi techo. This journal is A6 size and it dates from 2019 to 2023. Today I'll be flipping the third year, 2021. It's also housed in a red leather cover from the Hobonichi store in Kyoto, which I purchased on a trip in 2019. In late 2018, I was looking through planner videos to see what I wanted to buy for 2019, and it was a bit of a palate cleanser when I came across this Hobonichi video for the 5-year techo, and I got struck by a very, very simple statement, which was to reflect on the past 5 years and everything that's happened in your life. At first I thought, yeah, that's okay, I mean, 5 years, what could it really mean, right? But when I actually stopped to do it, there was a significant portion of my life that had completely changed. And there were many, many significant events within my own story that had occurred within those 5 years. I very quickly got upset and almost frustrated that I didn't document that, which I had to let go of since I only came into art journaling late in 2015, so that timeline wouldn't have checked out anyway for me, but from then on, I thought I have to buy this and I have to do it, because if the next 5 years are as eventful as the previous 5, I want to know what that's all about. I want to document that, and I want to see the nuance in each of those days. There are memories that are just lost to me that I don't remember. There are certain details that I couldn't go back and pick out from any specific day. And I wanted to know even how I felt about it. What parts of my growth did I think were important through that, or what did I even take note of? None of that was accessible for those 5 years. So I committed to doing it for the next 5, and that's what this journal is, and that is why this journal became one of my favorite journals and the first one that goes in my backpack whenever the fire alarm sets off in our apartment building. In this journal, I like to document any significant life events, any daily happenings, as well as personal growth and feelings and emotions that I might have about that, or anything really. I don't have too many hard and fast rules. I don't think anything is too insignificant that it can't be journaled. I do generally try to keep everything positively focused, and that's not just a journaling thing, that's a me thing. I am naturally a bit more cynical and a bit more pessimistic, so to balance that out, I try to give myself a positive perspective. And perspective is one of those interesting things that I have found throughout this journal that it's helped with. One of the benefits I find from keeping this journal specifically, where you document not only daily but over a longer period of time. So I wanted to share a bit more about that today. Before I do, let me just say I am not a therapist, so take it all with a grain of salt. This is how it helps me and what it feels like in my life, but I couldn't say really how this would affect anybody else. Like I said, I tend to be a bit cynical and pessimistic, so perspective is a really important tool I try to implement even before I had this journal to make sure that I went through life looking for good things and looking for things that were healthy and that would build me up and not, kind of reinforce these ideas that I might carry about a lot of things I had a lot of judgment about. So perspective, in the very literal sense, it's right here in this journal, and I think in the first year it was hard to notice because I was only documenting 2019, there was nothing else in the book. But by 2020, which I think was a year that gave everyone a perspective in and of itself just by living through it, but by 2020 I got to look back and I got to see a day-by-day, play-by-play of experiences I'd already had. Some were really, really hard to look back at. I can't even say that the perspective was helpful sometimes. Sometimes it would really challenge my nature and I would sit there and think, oh yeah, look how much of a better day I had last year. Today must not be worth it. I'm living a worse life this year, and it can really quickly spiral for me. So there is that daily practice as well of searching for things that are good. That perspective in itself, just to be able to note it down, just to be able to put it into the journal. I don't try and find things that weren't there, and I certainly don't try to make them up. I think there's nothing more confronting than a lie that you write down, because it's literally staring back at you. But that perspective was just truly fascinating. there were other things that, that were not so great in 2019 that I felt much better about in 2020. So it has been really interesting for that. And then obviously going through 2021 and contrasting that with the passage just above it, it was so much of a relief to read where I was at, or to even think that I had a really simple, carefree, really easy day in 2021. It just felt like the biggest victory after reading some of those passages from 2020. So perspective was one of the biggest benefits, but there were others as well. I also found it very clarifying for my thoughts. I have a pretty vivid imagination and my brain can be quite overactive a lot of the times. So to be able to clarify my thoughts into writing and really piece together what is real and what's not has been a nice benefit to me over the years. It also helps notice when patterns emerge. I don't think I've ever actually noticed that before about myself, but there were some things that I kept writing down and I realized it wasn't the first time I'd written that down, and I would almost see these cycles appear and then the emotions that followed after them and then my responses to them, and it seemed like there was a very cyclical nature to some of the things I was doing as a person. And not all bad, some of them were good patterns that would emerge too, but it was very, very helpful for me to be able to see that and to notice what I was doing so I could try a different approach and see if that would help. And definitely some of those things I've fixed through noticing how those patterns emerged. So that was actually a really good benefit just to my life in general, like my general health. I also think celebrating growth by commemorating it is a big benefit. After we're kids, we don't tend to have too many people come and celebrate some of those minor growths that we have as adults. I think it's important to do that because it feels good to be celebrated, but it's also important for us to take stock of the ways that we are growing, because it can always seem like we're trying to be better and trying to do better. There are lots of things that we're already succeeding at, and making small changes is better than making none. So I think by commemorating them, it feels like I'm celebrating the importance of that change, and that's important for me too. Things like PTSD and my struggles with that over the past 10 years has been really important for me to document even the most minor parts of growth, because a lot of my feelings about that can be very overwhelming, like I haven't changed, and it's been 10 years of suffering through a lot of those feelings. So even the most tiny moments that are completely internal that no one else would know, I will celebrate that by commemorating it in writing. And I think one of the most obvious benefits for a lot of people, one that actually doesn't resonate too much with me, it's important, but it's not the main reason I do it, but the memories will live on, and that there will be this collection of you. It sounds a bit morbid, but once you leave here, this part of you stays very tangibly. I'm not too concerned with what happens to these journals once I'm not here anymore, but I do enjoy them while I am here, and just for really stupid things, like I have a terrible memory sometimes. I can remember a lot of stupid stuff, like every argument Steve and I have ever had, but I can't remember really important things like a chronological timeline of events, or really interesting little bits and pieces, jokes that I can't remember, even catchphrases that, when someone says it to me, I'll remember the million times we've said it before, but it will just slip my mind every time I try to search for it in the chasm that is my memory. So I do appreciate having it, just for the pure fact that I have these memories to look back on, and being a very nostalgic person, that's important to me too. But I think one of the biggest benefits I've gained from having this is perspective. Like I mentioned earlier, this journal is a massive commitment, and there have been many times where I fell behind, or I just didn't feel like doing it on a certain day. Much as life ebbs and flows, so does our motivation. I have a huge passion and desire to see this through, so that usually helps motivate me to get it done anyway. But for all those other times where I am just in love with it and I do just want to do it, there are some things that I think of that might be helpful for you to know now if you're doing it, or beforehand if you're thinking of doing this in the future. I'm going to call them tips, but they're just general things that I think about for myself, and they're certainly not rules. With me, if there's a rule, I will tend to go ahead and break it first and keep breaking it forever, so I don't like to make too many rules. I've mentioned before I keep things pretty positively focused. That's not so much a journal rule as much as it is a life rule, or a guide, I guess. And then also, one of the things that I try to not do in this journal specifically is bulk it up too much. I think that's probably the thing that I keep in my head the most. So for that, I just mean I don't put a lot of bulky ephemera in there. No thick postcards, no puffy 3D stickers, or no extra pages, like no tip-ins or anything, if I can help it, which most of the time I usually can. It doesn't mean I don't put any stickers in there. I certainly put a lot of stickers and a lot of sticker photos, a lot of washi tapes, a lot of ephemera that I cut out from little test things that I do, but I try to not do that on every page. And if there is a page with it already on there, I try and put it on that page since it's already thickened up a little bit. Does that make sense? I just want to make sure that the book still lays flat at the end of the day, and even if it doesn't lay flat, because mine has chunked up a little bit, I don't want to put too much pressure on the binding. This is 365 pages at least. It's actually more than that, but it's also being handled every day. This is a lot of excessive handling on the spine of a book. And they're very thin pieces of paper. They're very, very lightweight. So those are things I like to think about just to make sure that the book will be preserved and it will last for a long time. Other things I like to think about are switching up my mediums just to keep it fresh. If I notice a page that has a theme kind of emerging, like all the writing has been done in blue pens, I'll continue in blue. If the writing is all super neat, I'll continue with it being neat. Sometimes I'll just switch it up just because I can, and I might just start writing in all capitals. I might do bubble lettering. I might just switch up the colors. It really doesn't matter to me, but pens, markers, pencils, watercolor sometimes, I try to keep that to a minimum just because it can also bulk up the journal by having a lot of the pages being warped or slightly crinkled. That also comes down to handwriting. If you notice the pages in my journal, I almost emboss as I write. I've got a very heavy hand. I've recently purchased a pencil board from Hobonichi, so you can see that it actually kind of stops when I remember to use it, that paper from my handwriting from embossing it. So that is actually something that I would recommend to anyone else who's heavy-handed, because believe it or not, being heavy-handed also does bulk up those pages a little bit. When you've even got the slightest bit of that, those journal entries kind of pushing into the page, it won't lay as flat as it does when it's not debossed, right? So I know it's a really, really simple thing and it will not kill your Hobonichi techo, but if you do use a pencil board, I do find that kind of helps. And it keeps it nice and flat and clean. Some people just don't like the look of handwriting that is pressed too hard. I don't really mind, but especially as I keep going through the journal and I keep working on days where stuff is behind it, it's actually nice because some of the times I put photos in there and I've written on the next page, I've accidentally pressed too hard and you can see the writing kind of pushing into that photo or any of the washi tape or any of the pictures that are under there. So I do use the pencil board almost every single time that I write journal entries now. For a lot of my colored illustrations or just coloring in general, I'll use water-based markers. I use my Zig clean colored dot markers as well as Zig real brush color markers, the Tombow twin dual tip markers, the zebra mild liners, a lot of those types of markers. I don't tend to notice the streaking on this paper because it's coated, so it does a better job of handling those, and because it's water-based, it won't penetrate through the paper. You still might see a little bit of ghosting, but it won't eat through it and transfer onto the next page. I use watercolor as well, but like I said, sparingly, just so I don't bulk everything up. And you'll notice on these pages here, I have photo strips. This is one of the things I do when I go on holidays or I've got huge events that are, multifaceted throughout the day that I want to document, that I just don't have the space to document. I'll make little photo collages and print them on sticker paper, and then I will cut them out and paste them in there as my journal entry. Sometimes I just do it because I just like photos, but again, I tend to keep those as minimal as possible. I don't want to do that all the time, even though I love how it looks, just for the pure fact that it bulks up like crazy. And if I can't say this enough, I try to not bulk the journal up too much. Although, I think you can see there's a lot that I've added into these pages, so it's a lot of do as I say, not as I do. I think I'm at the limit where I just really can't put too much else in here, but I'll continue to try anyway, and that will be my burden to live with in the future. But I do love how it's coming along. My last piece of advice for you is to do what works for you. I know it's advice that's as old as time itself, but it is important for you to make sure that your adjustments that you make throughout the journey are helping you enjoy the process. We all have different desires in how we enjoy journaling, and we all have different desires for the end result. I'm super passionate to see a finished product, and that's really motivating for me in a lot of times where I feel like I just need a bit of an extra nudge. But I hope that you can find that in your own process as well if you take on something like a 5-year journal, because it is a huge commitment. Ultimately, I think it's totally worth it. I'm on my 4th year of documenting now in 2022. I have a bit of a goal to make sure that every right-hand page has something on it, just so next year in my final year it doesn't feel like I'm trying to finish everything every day. But ultimately, if that doesn't work for me, I'll find what does. And that's a really important part of the process, to be flexible to what you need to keep yourself going. I love the perspective I get from this journal. I am so happy with it, but more importantly, I'm happy for what it holds, and that's my family, my friends, my memories, and my story. Thank you for watching, everyone. Bye.